Alright, so I'm gonna call these unofficial games, fan-made standalones or mods of existing games. I'm steering clear of saying certain terms that some of the powers that be don't necessarily like, so I'm just gonna broadly be sticking with unofficial games. But if you're curious, I'll label each of these with a more accurate descriptor on screen. I usually point out under the radar gems, but in this video I'll be talking about some stuff that's a bit more well known, at least if you're in a super niche community. Keep in mind, just because AM2R or Zelda Parallel Worlds are big in the unofficial game scene, doesn't mean that the average video game player really knows about them at all. It's like a sub interest. Like, first of all, you've got to be a dork, then a video game dork, then a retro video game dork, and ultimately an unofficial retro video game dork to be well aware that these are even things that exist. So give me a little bit more leash here than normal. Unofficial games come in a bunch of flavors: fan translations, small quality of life tweaks, brutally challenging stuff like Kaizo Mario. But the ones that I'm really into are the ones that take an existing game and turn it into something completely new. These are always massive labors of love and can be just as awesome as the originals, sometimes even better. So I hope that I can point out a few here that I think fans of the original entries in these series really shouldn't sleep on just because they're not completely legit. Also, I usually like to link to the games that I discuss, but not this time for obvious reasons, so if any of these spark your interest, just Google it and be extra cautious about what links you're clicking on, so yeah. Legend of Princess is a short 30-minute action platformer homage to the Legend of Zelda series. It was created by the developer of Iconoclasts and it has this chaotic twist on Zelda. It's cool to see a version of this world that's from this perspective outside of Zelda 2. When you start a playthrough, you get to pick from a variety of different Zelda-inspired items that allow you to change the difficulty and playstyle to really freshen up multiple playthroughs if you go through it multiple times. It's just loaded with this unique charm, even though you're still playing as a green tunic-wearing hero who's taking down Octorok and Keese. There's even boss fights against different versions of Phantom Ganon, Dark Link, and Goma. The pixel art here, just like Iconoclasts, is really fantastic and gives this game so much character. It's definitely shorter than I would have liked, but it will still impress any Zelda fans who are looking for a unique new take on the series. Zelda Perils of Darkness is a fresh take on Zelda 1 that just really blows the original out of the water. I was genuinely shocked by how much it hooked me because the original Zelda has always been a pretty hard game for me to go back to because it can be pretty archaic at times and it often feels like a guide is required to make it through in a reasonable amount of time. But Perils of Darkness revamps it all and makes it a way more accessible and completely new game with new dungeons, regions, music, and it's really nice new art. Plus, there's multiple difficulty modes that let you tailor the challenge to your liking, and the non-linear quest design rewards you for exploring every nook and cranny. Fans of the original NES game, and even fans of the newer Zelda games like myself, would both find a ton to love about this one. Metroid Planets is a fan-made gem that takes the original NES Metroid and gives it a loving, modern update. It's basically got two games in one, a full-on remake of the original game with the needed quality of life tweaks like a map system, and then there's a whole new planet that feels like the NES Metroid 1.5 that we never got. It's got customizable controls, new bosses, and even co-op multiplayer. Plus there's a room designer that lets you build your own levels, kinda think Mario Maker but for Metroid. It has new 8-bit style graphics that add a few extra frames in there, and music that still feels like the original. It all subtly updates things to make it more palatable to modern players, while still feeling like a retro game. There's also a ton of other options like a planet randomizer and ways to tweak the difficulty. This is just simply the new de facto way to experience NES Metroid if you still want an 8-bit feel. Metroid Rogue Dawn is built on the bones of the original NES Metroid, but it revamps it completely into something completely new that needs to be played by every Metroid fan. Like I said before, the original Metroid has some dusty elements to it that make it pretty tough to go back to as it was, and that's why I was surprised that Metroid Rogue Dawn really won me over so much. It's an unofficial prequel where you play as a mysterious character that works under Ridley, and trust me, it pulls you in fast, and I really couldn't stop playing it. I finished it in just one 5-hour sitting, and I wasn't intending to. The visuals in New Are Here are major upgrades, and it gives the game a much darker mood. The NES color palette is really pushed to its limits to create something pretty striking and somber. If there's one Metroid fan game that deserves to be put up there with AM2R to basically become another official part of the Metroid catalog, it's definitely Metroid Rogue Dawn. Super Junkoid is a game built on Super Metroid that transforms it so thoroughly it becomes a completely new, unrelated thing to Metroid. Well, everything here besides the audio design is new, which kind of makes the audio stick out like a sore thumb, but it still fits the melancholic vibes it's going for. The horror elements here are dialed up to the max compared to the relatively kid-friendly Metroid series, which gives it a creepy, sort of human-icky kind of atmosphere. You play as Junko, a girl who's trapped in a nightmare with a tormenting snake, though I really can't get too much into the story because honestly, I didn't really follow it very closely, but what I did get out of it was its vibes and its creative use of Super Metroid's mechanics. The sprite work here is really detailed and amazing, and I really just love to see how much work went into this. If you're into anime-style horror and love the feel of Super Metroid, this one's definitely worth checking out. If you're like me, you caught the Castlevania bug during the Igavania era of the series, that being the Metroidvania search action reinvention that debuted with Symphony of the Night. I've since gone back and played the more linear classics of the series, and while they're great on their own, they're definitely not quite the same thing. But then we have here the relatively recently released Castlevania Revamped. It's a merging of those eras into a really amazingly fleshed out, polished reimagining of Castlevania 1 that's structured like a Metroidvania. One of the complaints that's often lobbed at the NES classics is just how stiff they feel, and here they focus more on evoking the emotional feelings of playing those games rather than the actual feelings of the controls, so this is just a really well-feeling game to play. This is one of the games in this video that if the parent company, Konami in this case, were smart, they would work out some sort of deal and bring this under a more official banner, because this is a really polished, amazing game. Alright, and then we have another classic NES-style Castlevania from a new perspective, this time that being more literal because it's a first-person game built in GZ Doom called Castlevania Simon's Destiny. This game feels and looks a lot like a boomer shooter because it's built on the bones of boomer shooters. If you've always wanted a solid 3D Castlevania experience, but still want it to be relatively still era appropriate with its vibes, this is super cool. The thing that really stands out here to me is the actual feel of the whip. I'd imagine getting the feeling of a limited range weapon like a whip right in first person could have been pretty difficult, and it really just feels perfect here. Anyway, this one is awesome for any fans who are looking for a cool new way to experience the gothic castle that we've only really seen pulled off well in 2D. Next up is Silver Knight Crusaders, which is a arcade-style Castlevania fan game that creates its own characters and lore while still being very evocative of the series, even using some of its assets. If you want a game that hews closer to Rondo of Blood rather than Symphony of the Night, this is what you're looking for. It's built in open bore, which is an engine that a lot of fan-made 2D beat-em-up projects are made in, and that gives this game a much snappier, combo-y feel than the official classic-style Castlevanias. One tip if this one interests you though, make sure you enable the cheats that give you unlimited credits if you want to make your way through this one casually. Mega Man Maker, previously called Mega Maker, is what you think it is. It's basically Mega Man Mario Maker. As someone who loved the stage builder in Mega Man Powered Up on the PSP, this one is one of the coolest fan projects out there. It's constantly getting updated and worked on to add new bosses, mechanics, and it's quickly becoming a all-encompassing sandbox for making an 8-bit Mega Man stage of your dreams. As you can imagine, it's really cool to see what the community builds and how they create new ideas using the massive history of Robot Master abilities that are constantly being added. If you're curious if your favorite Robot Master or weapon are in the game yet, they have a really well curated wiki over on their site. As the only unfinished project in this video, I really hope that this gets to a point that they are really happy with it because it's really incredible. If there's one series that has the most unofficial games, it has to be the Mario series. And there are a ton that I could talk about, but the one that I really connected with the most was Super Mario Ultimate. It's built on Mario 3, my favorite Mario game, and it maintains the amazing feel while overhauling everything into a whole new game with new levels and new graphics. If there's one thing that really scares me off of a ton of unofficial games, it's usually the extreme difficulty that's present in a ton of them. They expect you to be an expert. But this is one of the few games in this video that have difficulty options that allow you to really tailor things to how you want to play. There's just really a ton of imaginative choices here that really impressed me, and I think that if you've played all the way through Mario 3 100 times like me, you definitely need to check this one out. Alright, and now we are on the final unofficial game that I want to shout out here, and it's an odd one. It's Deadpool for the NES. As a huge fan of NES Ninja Gaiden, this one is just a huge treat because this game is built on the bones of it. And that was really the perfect choice for Deadpool. The revolutionary cutscenes of the era are the perfect place for Deadpool to make his fourth wall breaking jokes, and Ryo Hayabusa's ability set really just does match perfectly with Deadpool. This is a complete overhaul of Ninja Gaiden with reskinned stages and enemies, and even Deadpool's iconic healing factor that makes this game a lot more approachable than proper NES Ninja Gaiden. There's just a ton of fun Easter eggs here to comics and retro video games, which just fit with Deadpool's whole thing. So if you're a fan of The Merc with a Mouth, or just want a really great NES Ninja Gaiden fan project, definitely look this one up. Alright, and those were some of my favorite unofficial games. I hope you found something here that really stuck out to you. Make sure you're extra careful when you're searching for these games, but yeah, if you liked the video, do all the YouTube-y stuff. It really genuinely helps out a ton. I'm not sure if I'm going to make another video about this sort of thing, because really those were the ones that I would like to point out. You know, there's stuff like AM2R, Sonic Robo Blast 2, Zelda Parallel Worlds, Hyper Metroid, Phase-On Hack Metroid. You know, there's really just some great stuff out there, but I feel like, you know, a lot of people know about those ones, and I don't really know if I have too many more to point out in the future. But yeah, if you like this video, check out my other stuff. You'll probably really dig it. And anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for watching. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching.